In Bank Manager Makes Black Woman Wait 2 Hours, his face changes when board members walk in. A seemingly ordinary banking appointment takes a shocking turn when blatant discrimination sparks a life-changing confrontation. How will Ruth Daniels, a powerful yet humble black entrepreneur, handle the disrespect? And what will happen when the board members walk in and see the truth for themselves? Stick around to find out, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more eye-opening stories. Ruth Daniels adjusted her blazer and stepped confidently into the grand marble lobby of Pinnacle First Bank. Her heels clicked with precision against the polished floors, echoing the rhythm of a woman who had earned every ounce of her success. Years of grit and determination had led her to this moment, securing the final piece of financing for her latest real estate project, a community feminist housing development that would transform the neighborhood she grew up in. She approached the front desk with a calm smile. "Good morning," she greeted the young teller behind the counter. "I'm Ruth Daniels, here for a 10 a.m. meeting with Mr. Porter." The teller glanced at her screen and then at Ruth, her smile faltering slightly as she processed the name. "Let me inform Mr. Porter that you've arrived," she said. "Please, have a seat, Ms. Daniels." Ruth nodded and took a seat in one of the sleek leather chairs in the waiting area. It was 9:55 a.m. and the efficiency she valued so deeply had her ahead of schedule. She glanced at her phone, skimming through her notes to prepare for the meeting. The loan was practically a done deal. Her credit score was immaculate, her business portfolio robust. This was a formality, but Ruth understood the importance of optics. Minutes ticked by. At 10:10 a.m. Ruth noticed the teller glance nervously in her direction, then whisper to a colleague. Her chest tightened slightly, but she chose to remain composed. She had learned early in life that poise was often her best weapon. At 10:30 a.m. Ruth decided to inquire. She walked back to the counter, her tone polite but firm. "Excuse me, I just wanted to confirm. Has Mr. Porter been informed that I'm here?" The teller looked flustered, fumbling with her keyboard. "Yes, ma'am, he's aware. It's just, he's finishing up some other tasks right now. He'll be with you shortly." Ruth nodded, though her patience was starting to thin. She returned to her seat, crossing her legs and straightening her posture. She noticed the bank's other customers coming and going, each one being attended to promptly. Meanwhile, the clock continued to mock her professionalism with every tick. At 11 a.m. Ruth stood again. This time, her voice carried a sharper edge. "It's been an hour past my appointment time. I'd like to know what's causing the delay." The teller hesitated before picking up the phone. After a quiet exchange, she put the receiver down and said, "Mr. Porter will be out shortly." Surely turned into another half hour. When the bank manager finally emerged, his appearance did little to soften Ruth's rising frustration. Samuel Porter was a middle-aged man with an air of arrogance, his navy suit perfectly tailored, his slick-back hair glinting under the overhead lights. He approached Ruth with a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ms. Daniels, apologies for the wait," he said, his tone more dismissive than apologetic. "We've been swamped this morning." Ruth held her ground, looking him square in the eye. "I had a 10 a.m. appointment. It's now 11:45. I'd appreciate it if we could proceed." "Of course," he said, gesturing toward his office. "Right this way." As they walked past the teller stations, Ruth couldn't help but notice the subtle glances exchanged by the staff. It was as though her presence had disrupted the unspoken order of the bank. Once inside his office, Mr. Porter motioned for her to sit, then took his time settling into his chair, arranging his papers as though she had nothing better to do than wait on him. "Now," he began, leaning back in his chair. "What can I do for you today, Ms. Daniels?" Ruth resisted the urge to clench her fists. "I believe you're already aware. I'm here to finalize the loan for the Franklin Heights development. All the documents should be in your system." Mr. Porter's eyes flicked over his computer screen. He clicked his mouse a few times, then leaned back again, folding his hands over his stomach. "Ah, yes, the Franklin Heights project. That's quite an undertaking." "Yes, it is," Ruth replied, her tone steady. "But as you'll see, I've met every requirement. My business plan, financial records, and projections have all been reviewed and approved by your underwriting team. This is the final step." Mr. Porter's lips curled into a thin smile. "I see. Well, these things take time, Miss Daniels. I'll need to review everything again to ensure there are no discrepancies." "I was informed that the loan was already approved pending your signature," Ruth countered. "That's correct, but I like to take a personal look at these matters," he said, his words dripping with condescension. "You understand, of course." Ruth bit the inside of her cheek, her anger bubbling just below the surface. She knew what this was, a deliberate attempt to undermine her, to assert his control in a situation where she had done everything right. But she also knew better than to let him see her rattle. "Take all the time you need," Ruth said, her voice smooth as glass. "I'll wait right here." Mr. Porter's smile faltered ever so slightly, but he nodded and turned back to his screen. The minutes stretched into an hour as he clicked leisurely through her files, occasionally making notes or asking irrelevant questions. Ruth answered each one with precision, her frustration masked by an unyielding composure. By the time the clock struck 12:45, Ruth had reached the limits of her patience. She stood abruptly, forcing Mr. Porter to look up in surprise. "Mr. Porter," she said, her voice firm but calm, "I value professionalism and respect, and I expect the same from those I do business with. If there's an issue with my application, I'd appreciate it if you could address it directly. Otherwise, I believe we've wasted enough time." Mr. Porter blinked, his demeanor shifting into defensive arrogance. "Miss Daniels, I assure you, I'm just doing my due diligence." "And I assure you," Ruth replied, "that I'm more than capable of recognizing a delay tactic when I see one. If my business is not welcome here, I'll be happy to take it elsewhere." Before Mr. Porter could respond, a knock on the office door interrupted them. A junior employee, Erin, poked her head in, her expression apologetic. "Excuse me, Mr. Porter, the regional board members have just arrived for their meeting." The color drained from Mr. Porter's face. He stood abruptly, smoothing his tie as though the room had grown 10 degrees hotter. "Of course," he stammered. "Please show them to the conference room. I'll be there shortly." Erin nodded but hesitated, glancing at Ruth with a flicker of recognition. "Actually, one of the board members specifically asked to see Ms. Daniels." Ruth's eyebrows lifted, her curiosity piqued. Mr. Porter's expression darkened as he turned to her, his discomfort now palpable. "It seems you have quite the connections, Ms. Daniels," he said, his voice strained. Ruth met his gaze evenly. "Yes, it seems I do." Ruth Daniels straightened her posture, following Erin out of the office with deliberate grace. The tension in the air was palpable as Mr. Porter trailed behind, his footsteps sharp and hurried against the marble floors. The bank lobby was abuzz with quiet murmurs as employees and customers alike watched the small procession head toward the executive conference room. The doors to the room were propped open, revealing a cluster of impeccably dressed board members engaged in animated conversation. At the center of the group stood Thomas Grayson, a tall, silver-haired man whose commanding presence seemed to brighten the space. When he spotted Ruth, his face broke into a warm smile. "Ruth," he called out, his voice booming with genuine delight, "it's been too long." "Mr. Grayson," Ruth replied, returning his smile as she approached. He extended his hand, but Ruth bypassed it, giving him a brief but heartfelt hug. The other board members exchanged curious glances, clearly intrigued by the familiarity. "Thomas, you're looking well," Ruth added, stepping back. "And you're as sharp as ever," he said, gesturing toward a chair. "Please have a seat. I hope Mr. Porter has been taking good care of you." The question was innocent enough, but the way Grayson's gaze darted toward Mr. Porter made it clear he suspected otherwise. Ruth hesitated for a moment, her eyes briefly locking with Porter's. His expression was stiff, his hands fidgeting at his sides. Let's just say the morning has been eventful, Ruth said diplomatically as she sat down. Thomas's brows furrowed, but he didn't press the issue. Instead, he turned to the other board members. Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Ruth Daniels, one of the sharpest minds in real estate development. Her Franklin Heights project is exactly the kind of forward-thinking investment we need. The board members greeted Ruth warmly, some nodding in recognition. Mr. Porter, who had been hovering awkwardly by the door, stepped forward, attempting to regain control of the narrative. Yes, Ruth and I were just finalizing the details of her loan application, he interjected, his voice tight. It's a complex project, and I was ensuring all due diligence was completed. Ruth glanced at him, her expression unreadable. That's an interesting way to describe it, she said, her tone neutral but laced with subtle challenge. Grayson's sharp eyes didn't miss the underlying tension. Is that so? He asked, his voice carrying an edge of curiosity. He turned back to Ruth. And how's the process been from your perspective? Ruth took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I've found the underwriting team to be thorough and efficient, she began. However, the final steps of this process have been unnecessarily delayed. Mr. Porter shifted uncomfortably. I assure you, Mr. Grayson, I've been meticulous in my review. We have to ensure all procedures are followed to the letter. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying Porter. Meticulous, you say? Ruth, did you have an appointment scheduled for this morning? Yes, Ruth said, her voice firm. At 10 a.m. I arrived early. And what time is it now? Grayson asked, his tone pointed. Ruth glanced at her watch. It's nearly 1 p.m. A murmur rippled through the room. The other board members exchanged looks, their expressions ranging from surprise to disapproval. Grayson's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. Samuel, he said evenly, I trust there's a very good reason why one of our most promising clients was left waiting for 3 hours. Porter opened his mouth, then closed it again, his face flushing. I was ensuring everything was in order, he stammered. Grayson turned to Ruth. Ruth, would you excuse us for a moment? I'd like to have a word with Mr. Porter in private. Of course, Ruth replied, standing gracefully. As she stepped into the hallway, she couldn't help but notice the satisfied glances exchanged among a few employees nearby. Clearly, Mr. Porter's behavior had not gone unnoticed within the ranks. Inside the room, the muffled sound of Grayson's raised voice could be heard, his words sharp and deliberate. Ruth allowed herself a small smile, but it quickly faded. Moments like these were a reminder of the barriers she still faced, no matter how far she had come. After several minutes, the door opened, and Grayson reappeared, his expression calm but resolute. Ruth, come back in, he said. She stepped back into the room, her head held high. Mr. Porter remained by the wall, his face pale and his demeanor subdued. Grayson gestured for Ruth to sit again. I'd like to personally apologize for the way this matter was handled, Grayson said. It's not reflective of the standards we hold at this institution, and steps will be taken to ensure it doesn't happen again. I appreciate that, Ruth said, her tone measured. I've always believed in this bank's potential to be a leader in community investment. I hope we can work together to make that vision a reality. Grayson nodded. Absolutely. And as for the Franklin Heights project, I'll personally ensure the paperwork is expedited. Consider the loan approved. The words were a balm to Ruth's frustration. She offered Grayson a warm smile. Thank you, Thomas. That means a great deal. As the meeting concluded, Ruth shook hands with the other board members, each one expressing their admiration for her work. When she finally stepped out of the conference room, she felt a mix of relief and triumph. But her mind was already racing with thoughts of how to use this experience to advocate for systemic change. Aaron, the junior employee who had first intervened, approached her timidly. Miss Daniels, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how you were treated earlier. It wasn't right. Ruth placed a reassuring hand on Aaron's shoulder. Thank you for speaking up. It takes courage to do the right thing, even when it's not easy. Aaron nodded, her face brightening slightly. Ruth turned toward the exit, her stride purposeful. This wasn't just a victory for her, it was a step toward something greater. Ruth Daniels stepped out of the bank's conference room, feeling victorious but reflective. She had come here expecting nothing more than a standard transaction, yet the day had spiraled into a glaring reminder of the challenges she continued to face. As she made her way toward the exit, her stride was measured, her head held high, and her mind brimming with thoughts on how to channel this experience into something transformative. The bank lobby was noticeably quieter now, the earlier murmurs replaced by a collective stillness. Employees who had been observing from a distance quickly averted their gazes, though Ruth noticed some casting discreet smiles her way. Aaron, the junior employee who had been the first to acknowledge her plight, was stationed near the teller counters. When their eyes met, Aaron offered a small, supportive nod. Before Ruth could reach the doors, Thomas Grayson appeared beside her, his long strides quickly matching her pace. "Ruth, a moment if you don't mind." She stopped, turning to face him. "Of course, Thomas." He glanced around, lowering his voice to ensure privacy. "I wanted to personally thank you, not just for your patience today, but for handling the situation with such grace. You've given us an opportunity to address some systemic issues that, frankly, we should have tackled long ago." Ruth tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "I appreciate that, Thomas, but the reality is, I shouldn't have had to exercise patience in the first place. This isn't just about today. It's about ensuring that every customer, regardless of their background, is treated with respect." Thomas nodded, his face grave. "You're absolutely right. And I'd like to extend an invitation to you. Our board is forming a task force to review and improve our customer service policies, with a particular focus on equity and inclusion. I can't think of anyone better to advise us than you." The offer caught Ruth off guard. While she was used to wearing many hats as a business owner, stepping into a role that could influence institutional change on this level wasn't something she had considered. Until now. She smiled. "I'd be honored to contribute. Let's make sure what happened today doesn't happen to anyone else." Thomas extended his hand. "Then it's settled. I'll have my office follow up with the details." As they shook hands, the weight of the moment settled over Ruth. It wasn't just a win for her. It was a step toward dismantling the biases that plagued spaces like these. As Ruth exited the bank, she spotted a familiar face waiting by the curb. A young man in a neatly tailored suit with a camera bag slung over his shoulder. Michael, her assistant, had been waiting for her call but seemed to have taken the initiative to meet her directly. His face lit up as he saw her approach. "James Daniels, how'd it go?" he asked, opening the door of the sleek black car parked nearby. Ruth slid into the passenger seat, exhaling deeply as Michael joined her on the driver's side. "It was eventful," she replied, her lips curving into a wry smile. "Let's just say the loan is approved, but not without a few bumps along the way." Michael raised an eyebrow as he started the engine. "Do I even want to know?" "You'll read about it in my memoir someday," she joked, though the humor was tinged with truth. As they drove off, Ruth pulled out her phone and began drafting an email to her team. She wasn't just going to let this be another story of triumph over adversity. She was determined to turn it into a teaching moment. Later that evening, Ruth stood before her team in their bustling downtown office. The Franklin Heights project had brought together a diverse group of architects, designers, and community leaders, all united by a shared vision to create affordable housing without sacrificing quality or dignity. The energy in the room was palpable as Ruth recounted the day's events. "When I walked into that bank this morning, I thought it would be a simple transaction," she began, her voice steady. "But what I encountered was a stark reminder of the barriers we face, not just as professionals, but as people of color." Her team listened intently, their expressions ranging from outrage to admiration. Ruth continued, her tone growing firmer. "This isn't just my fight, it's ours. And while today was a victory, it's also a call to action. We can't just build better neighborhoods. We have to build better systems." A round of applause erupted, followed by a flurry of ideas as the team brainstormed ways to integrate social advocacy into their work. Ruth felt a swell of pride. This was the kind of ripple effect she had always hoped to create. Meanwhile, back at Pinnacle First Bank, the fallout from the day's events was already in motion. Thomas Grayson called an emergency meeting with the board and senior staff to address the situation. The conversation was candid and unflinching, with Grayson outlining new policies to ensure equitable treatment of all customers. Mr. Porter, whose behavior had sparked the upheaval, was notably absent from the meeting, having been placed on immediate administrative leave. By the end of the meeting, a sense of resolve filled the room. Grayson's voice carried the final word. "This isn't just about saving face. It's about doing what's right. And from this point forward, that's exactly what we're going to do." The following week, Ruth received a formal letter of apology from the bank, along with an invitation to speak at their upcoming Diversity and Inclusion Summit. While the gesture was appreciated, Ruth knew the real work would happen in the trenches, in the policies implemented, the biases confronted, and the lives impacted. As she reflected on the experience, Ruth felt a renewed sense of purpose. She thought of Erin, the junior employee who had shown courage in a difficult moment, and made a note to reach out to her. People like Erin were the future, and Ruth intended to ensure they had the support and mentorship they needed to thrive. The next time Ruth walked into Pinnacle First Bank, it was for the task force's inaugural meeting. Erin greeted her at the door, her face bright with excitement. "Miss Daniels, it's such an honor to have you here." "The honor is mine," Ruth replied, placing a hand on Erin's shoulder. "Let's get to work." As Ruth entered the boardroom, the weight of her earlier experience lifted, replaced by the promise of meaningful change. She had turned a moment of injustice into a platform for progress. And she wasn't done yet. This is the kind of story that challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths, to demand better from ourselves and the systems around us. Ruth's journey is a reminder that progress isn't always easy, but it's always worth fighting for. Would you stand up for change in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire action and hope.